I'm so mad. What if I called you an artless, clapper-clawed bugbear? Or a mangled, half-baked maggot pie? Or unmuzzled rump pignut? If you feel insulted in any way, then William Shakespeare did a good job when he was creating his insults to put into his plays and writing. William Shakespeare was a talented playwright who contributed to the English language as well as sparked a new idea into script writing and playwriting. Today I wanted to tell you about some of the new words that William Shakespeare taught us or wrote and made up that we use today. I also wanted to tell you about some stories and plays that he wrote during his time period and how they were wrote, why he wrote them. I also wanted to talk to you about how the different kind of Shakespearean plays changed the way that people look at different theater obstacles and different theater ways that were shown to the audience. There were countless words that we use every day, and we don't even know that we use them, that William Shakespeare made. One of the words themselves was countless, like I just said earlier. It was said by Marcus Andronix in the play Titus Andronix, which was written by Shakespeare himself. Another word that Shakespeare wrote was radiance. That's another word he came up with. That was in the play All's Well That Ends Well. It was said by two women talking to each other about their virginity and how they thought their virginity was a radiant thing. Some of the words are normal that we use every day. Some of the words are not so normal, like the word radiant and countless are words that we use every day. However, the word leapfrog and scallywag aren't really used. Leapfrog can be used when you're talking to a child about different games that they can play, games that they can play with their friends. When I was on biography.com, I learned that a lot of things about William Shakespeare's life are not well known. However, the well-known things are these new words that are put in plays and these new words that are seen and that we use every day. These words may have been said by the characters. However, the plays that he wrote included a new entertainment to the audiences during that time period. He loved romantic comedy. William Shakespeare loved to write romantic comedies, and one of his first plays that he ever wrote was a comedy called Comedy of Errors. It was inspired by the Roman Plautus, who was a Roman playwright during the Old Latin period, during that time period, and William Shakespeare would use his writing to inspire his writing, which was a very common idea during that time for playwriters. They used the works that, say, Roman Plautus used, Shakespeare used his work to inspire new work that he wrote. The Comedy of Errors was about twin brothers who were separated at birth, and eventually they came back together, but that caused a lot of problems for the people in the family because they were twin brothers and no one knew who they were, how they got there, and it really confused a lot of people. So that was a really nice and funny play that Shakespeare wrote. Another play that Shakespeare wrote is a well-known play called Romeo and Juliet, which was about star-crossed lovers who were not able to be together because of families. And one of the quotes that Romeo says is, "Thus with a kiss I die," and then he dies, and then Juliet dies, and in the end it's sad, but throughout the play there are some funny parts, and that was one of Shakespeare's favorite plays. It's based off the poem called Romeus and Juliet, which was not an original piece by Shakespeare. However, that was really common in that time period for playwriters to take poems and different stories and make it into a bigger play and something that they could put their name on. And when I researched in the websites, or in Webster's Encyclopedia, I learned that the story of Romeo and Juliet was not predicted to be a really successful play. However, after it performed in front of people, there were so many more audiences coming to the theaters because they really wanted to see it, and it's still being shown today. In fact, my high school, Tedrock High School, was able to perform Romeo and Juliet last year, and that is when we got one of our biggest audiences, was during that play. And I do think it's because of Shakespeare and his work and how amazing he writes his scripts, and it's just really entertaining to everyone in the audience that comes. When we find out that these plays were made during that time period, it caused a really big ruckus for all the people in that time period because of how serious it ended up being. During that time period, Catholics were a really big thing in England, and William Shakespeare was anti-religious. so he didn't really think about what he put on a stage, he just did it. I read an article called Shakespeare in the 19th Century. It surprised the audiences, is what this article told me. It surprised the audiences that they were introduced to suicide. So in Romeo and Juliet, when Juliet killed herself with the knife and when Romeo drank the poison, audience were shocked because this was the first time they were seeing a death on a stage. Usually deaths were off stage and people would just hear it, but now William Shakespeare brought this death to the stage. And it really surprises audiences because that's something they've never seen before. I read a journal of language teaching that says he made this suicide into a beautiful thing that a lot of people don't see to be beautiful, but William Shakespeare saw it as a beautiful thing. And so he took it, he put it on the stage, and it was a big hit for people, and they really liked it. He took this evil thing and made it into a masterpiece, really, is what he did. He presented fights and blood and gore and stuff on a stage that people don't want to see. However, nowadays, we see that stuff and we think, it's really not a big deal, you know? We see people get impaled with a sword, and we see people with a bunch of blood on themselves. It's just a normal thing for us, but during that time period, it was not a normal thing. Today I told you about how William Shakespeare used new words, and he made new words that we use nowadays. I also told you about his different plays that he wrote and how they impacted other people, how it shocked audiences, how it wowed audiences, and I also told you about how these plays changed the way that people saw different masterpieces. William Shakespeare's work then is not how it is now. Now it's a lot more intense and gory, and it's different than how William Shakespeare portrayed it. But because he began it, it has grown into different marvelous masterpieces that are shown on stages, on television, in books. It's just shown everywhere, and it's really cool to see how Shakespeare's work was changed that way. And William Shakespeare, as a writer and a performer, he did exactly what he was meant to do, and that is to entertain his audience and teach his audience new things so that they'll keep coming back to the theater.